No Chaser. And today I want to talk about how the simple things in life can be lifesavers. And I'll kind of explain it through this. I think this is an experience that almost all of us have been through, but I'll go through it in sort of the sense of how my mind played it out. So, classic example, um, I didn't have lunch, I was at work, and was getting very frustrated. And some people weren't doing things that I expected them to do because the world revolves around me. That's how I turn in. That's how I turn on a light bulb. By the way, I just hold a light bulb up to the outlet, and then the world revolves and turns it in for me. That's my mindset. I'm getting so frustrated, and I'm just like, ugh, I'm just like the days that I feel like it's already becoming awful. And then I eat something, and I feel better. And there's this funny thing that plays out in my mind where I can feel kind of the mechanisms of my ego or just this narrative that's playing out where I'm just like, no, all those reasons I was mad were valid, and it wasn't just because I was hungry and cranky. They were honest, and they were actual like real slights against me that I should have been angry about, and all that kind of nonsense of just trying to justify the fact that I was just being cranky because I was hungry. And there's something in my mind where it just won't allow that. It's like it's almost humiliating to me that it's just like so much of my like mental state can be based on something so simple. And I bring this up because I think it highlights an important idea that I think I've stumbled across in recovery before, where it goes back to that almost kind of narcissistic view that I have, or whatever you want to call it, where I feel like in order to remedy my issue, whether it's with drugs and alcohol or depression or any of that stuff, that it's I'm a unique snowflake of terribleness. Sometimes people use the phrase terminal uniqueness, where it's just like you build up this thing where your problems are very like specific and novel, and they require so much more, or they're unfixable. A little dash of self-pity in there to make this all work. And I would just think it's like, people would talk about the basics of self-betterment: eating, sleep, physical activity, things like that. And be like, yeah, those are all fine and dandy, but no, I need some big time psychological breakthroughs, and I need something like massive, like an overhaul of something huge, a psychic change in my life to get better. I cannot be fixed by those simple things. And to be honest too, I'm not stating that that you can fix any sort of your chemical dependency or psychiatric problems or anything like that with just these simple things. But I believe, at least in my case, that just for a very long time, I just undervalued how much influence they have on my mood and what they have on my outlook on life. Just even things like that. Like going back to the example of just the mind state I was in when I was just very frustrated and just kind of mad at the world in this kind of micro way, but it was influencing me at the time, and it was just because I was hungry and I just needed to eat. And again, the whole sort of game I was playing where I just wanted to justify it as if it was something more than what it really was. And of course, you can look up just the endless amount of studies and psychological opinions and all the testimonials and just everything that says, hey, you eat poorly, you sleep poorly, you're too sedentary, you're just not engaged or active enough. Like all of those things lead to bad outcomes. And I think most people kind of like understand that in a way. But what may be lost, at least was lost for me, is that I didn't understand like how much it affected me. Like I said, it goes back to the idea where it's like there has to be something more to like do a complete overhaul of the way I am. Like I need something more. I need to like radically like have a not just a change, because if you're trying to like in self betterment, it does require a lot of changes. But I think sometimes, again, at least for me, I fixated on these changes to be other things rather than just like the very simple things of like just sleep regularly and see how that affects you. Just eat better and see how that affects you. Just try to get some endorphins and natural dopamine from some sort of like physical exercise. And like this is not lost on me too, that there's a lot of times where people are very pissed off from people that just, someone talks about like big time like problems that they're having, internal, mental health issues, or people that are dealing with addiction, and someone says like, you need to start jogging and it'll be all good if you just get on this like vegan diet or keto diet. Not that there's anything wrong with those, but it's kind of that flippant way that people just, it almost feels dismissive of what your struggles are. I don't want to like travel down that avenue. I really am not trying to do that, but I and not saying those people are right for just jamming that down your throat, because I think it comes from a place where they don't realize the severity of what issues you have. But with that being said, they can't be dismissed for like how powerful they can be. Because one thing I noticed is that it's not just like fixing, even take the exercise part about just like basic sleeping and eating. It's not just about like some of those benefits you can just think of just like feeling a little bit physically better, or just there is so much that revolves around what is affected by just eating and sleeping. I like eating for one. I can have a day derailed by just a, a bad sort of like gluttonous, cheap, just empty calories and fats and sugars, and then the crash that comes with it, and then some even the like mental and emotional things of like feeling kind of like crap from like pigging out, and then if it happens in the middle of the day, you're just lethargic and you don't feel really great about yourself, and it just there's a lot of stuff going on. Not even again just your bare like physical stuff, but things like where I would have some issues with like binge eating and stuff like that, and I was kind of just using it as this like temporary thing of release, and then I'd feel like shame, like I'd have like a shame hangover after. I was like, God, look at that, how did I just eat like that? I mean, it stuff like that just has so many different like tentacles that reach everywhere in your life as well too. Like the way that it makes you feel mentally, emotionally, and yes, I'm still talking about like sleeping and eating, mentally and emotionally, like it are affected big time, because so much of how you go about your day, if you're feeling some deficiencies even physically when you're trying to go about your day, that can like vastly affect how your day goes, how you approach situations that occur, how you interact with those in your life, whether it's your significant other, your kids, or your friends, or your coworkers, how those like negative interpersonal interactions can then affect your day too. And this stuff can just be a sort of chain reaction where, especially in the realm of like sleeping, where if you get on a bad sleep cycle, it kind of keeps going, and it's very, very hard to break. And, a lot like in terms of, addiction or alcoholism or things like that, you get used to like bad habits that the negative way of kind of being, or the unhealthy way of being just kind of becomes the norm. So you might not even, you get to a point where you've been just sleeping so poorly, you don't even like recognize how poorly you're sleeping. You're like, this is just kind of the way it is. Or I mean, especially with eating too. And in the same way that it can affect a lot of different things of how you approach sleeping and eating, it's not lost on me that in that same vein, they're hard to change because of how integrated they can be with your life. Like a big thing is that especially with eating, it's easier to eat in unhealthy processed ways, because if you talk about fast food, you talk about like putting things together, you talk about the cost of like being able to eat healthy, not just in price, but in preparation and time and all that type of stuff. Like even in sleeping, when it comes to sleeping, how your work schedule looks, like what other responsibilities you have with the day, like the things you might miss out on. And I even mean things that seem kind of benign, but like, maybe you like to binge watch TV at night, and you don't want to go to bed because you enjoy doing that. I mean, there's like real sacrifices that have to be considered for this. But in considering those sacrifices, just understanding the benefits of just how drastically they can start to affect your mood and your day-to-day way of being. Like I really want to hone on the sleeping and eating part of it, but I mean, if you throw in exercise as well too, like that, they all start of like work in tandem as well. And this was like based on a discussion I was having with somebody like prior, where if you work on like just these small like basic things, they all kind of they mesh together as well too. You talk about sleeping, eating, and exercise. They kind of, if you are improving one, it helps your ability to do the other. And again, they're difficult to do, but they're kind of simple. Like again, basic. They're simple, and sometimes it can be as far as like trying to improve your well-being and the obstacles that come with that. It could be it could be almost kind of freeing to just approach something in a simple, singular way of just like you know trying to just fix relationships or like completely fix what my like work life is, or just like trying to like dive into like some new things that I hope will kind of change my perspective, like whether it's you're approaching new hobbies or having to find ways to be social or having to take on new responsibilities or having to excise things from your life, which I'm not saying things you should just disregard, but trying to take all that on can be like very overwhelming and difficult as well too. Like I think there's something that can be beneficial just as having sort of basic stuff, which does it, just because I say simple doesn't mean it's easy, but just having basic stuff where it's just like I am just working on improving these things. And I say, what kind of like spurred me to bring up this topic is just from my own life of just applying these things. And again, especially when you talk about like in terms of eating, it has been difficult, but I continue to do it and to eat well because despite its difficulties, I can like vastly see the improvement in my life, and honestly, the physical and the health things there. But I'm just continuing to do it because it just helps my like mental acuity and my emotional well being. It's not fixing everything. Like kale shakes and the Atkins diet or whatever is not solving my depression or anything. And one real quick thing too I want to state as far as like eating goes is that I'm not even talking about just diet stuff. I'm not saying get hooked in or hone in on like one sort of diet thing just as far as eating well. Just trying to do like a general sense of just improvement of eating and not trying to do it just to like purely for aesthetic value of cutting down weight. But again, that's another one of those factors. And doing so and feeling healthier and maybe looking better improves more than just your physical health. It improves your overall well-being. Again, there's so many different levels that can kind of like all boats rise with the tide when you focus more on eating and sleeping better. And you just sometimes when you are doing these things too, the other added benefits is that it can get you to engage in less destructive behaviors in order to keep up your ability to do those things like eat and sleep well. Like you might engage in kind of addictive or negative behaviors later at night when you're by yourself alone and you're starting to go down like rabbit holes on the internet or just masturbating too much. I don't know why I'm covering my mouth doing that, but like, or binge eating or stuff like that. But in just getting yourself to committing to like go to bed at a decent time and doing that, you also cut out on those behaviors. I mean, there's just so many direct and indirect effects where it can be beneficial. So that is my spiel. I'm not just being like, all right, man, I know you're depressed, but go jogging. Or I know you're addicted to crystal meth. Here's like some, salad. I'm not saying that by any means, but I don't know, just some thoughts I had. Like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, do all the things. That's my spiel too. I just, anybody that's out there struggling, I hope it gets easier. Anybody out there that's doing well, I hope it continues. And for the rest of y'all, be well.